Welcome to today's speaker series event, Hasan Piker, Off the Stream and in the Flesh. My name is Yasmin Ali. I'm a third year in the college from Rochester, Minnesota, majoring in global studies and Middle Eastern studies. At the IOP, I have served as an intern with the Fellows Program and look forward to serving as SIB co-chair next academic year. As a viewer and fan of Hasan Piker's streams on US politics, foreign policy, and culture, I am especially excited to welcome him to campus today. Like many of my peers, I was first introduced to his content through viral short clips on social media, which led me to explore his longer form commentary under the screen name HasanAbi on Twitch. I find his commentary quite refreshing and striking, especially in a political landscape marked by centrism and quietness within the Democratic Party today. While I don't agree with everything he says, I admire his willingness to stand firm in his progressive beliefs, whether or not it draws criticism, and even when it's taxing, like debating Ethan Klein for 4 hours. Originally from Istanbul, Piker began his career after college at the Young Turks, where he created the segment The Breakdown for the TYT network. He's been profiled by the New York Times, which noted his combined 4.5 million followers across YouTube and Twitch. He rose to prominence during the pandemic and gained further attention for his coverage of the 2024 election cycle, all within an ever-evolving media environment. Hasan will be in conversation today with Astead Herndon, national politics reporter at the New York Times, host of the podcast The Run-Up, and a member of the Institute of Politics board. Some quick housekeeping before we begin. First, please remember to silence your phones. Second, when it's time for Q&A, 2 microphones will be placed in the audience, so please line up for that, and remember that priority for the first questions will go to students. Finally, please make sure to check upcoming IOP events, including Opposition in Very Difficult Times, featuring former IOP Pritzker Fellow Genesis Davila tomorrow, May 13th at 12:30 p.m. at the IOP, and Chicago Styles' From Delta to Electric, Tracing the Chicago Blues Legacy on Friday, May 16th at 12 p.m. at the IOP, which will be a great opportunity to explore and celebrate one of the city's most iconic musical traditions. You can register for both of those events on the IOP's website. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Hasan Piker and Astead Herndon.
Wow, what do you think of that music?
That's the perfect intro music. As soon as there was an Ethan Klein mention, I was like, oh, I'm surrounded by fans.
Yo, I'm so excited to be here. My name is Astead Herndon. As they mentioned, I'm a politics reporter at the New York Times, and I am on the board of advisors of the Institute of Politics. And I'm super excited for us to be here with Hasan Piker and to lead this conversation today. I know they went over some of this stuff before, but I will re-emphasize a couple things. This, like a lot of IOP events, is meant to stoke political discourse, to engage in discussion, and even a little good-hearted debate, and I think that we're going to see some of that today, but it's also to engage with students. So there will be student questions at the end, and when you see the microphones come out, you do not have to wait. You can start lining up at that time. But I am going to jump in here, and I think my questions are really going to go in a little bit of an arc to learn more about kind of where your career, how you found yourself here, and then get to some political stuff more towards the end. I think we broadly know your path, going from Young Turks to one of the biggest Twitch streamers in the country. But what is the origin of your interest in politics, and what was the moment where you decided to break off of the Young Turks and go off from yourself?
Well, okay. So I was always interested in politics because I grew up in Turkey, and it's you kind of get thrown into the realm of politics in Turkey because it's way more impactful, way more consequential than the way that a lot of Americans view it. And I grew up in the Erdogan regime taking power as well, and I saw a lot of that social conservatism and the immediate ways that it changed my life. I was a big fan of political cartoons, and I remember these political cartoonists that I used to read were getting sued by the Erdogan administration, which is not so dissimilar when you think about what Donald Trump is doing right now, and there's definitely a direct analog there. But it was little things like that and life-changing and meaningful ways that always kept me interested in talking about politics and keeping up with the discourse from an early age. And then as far as like how I transitioned from the Young Turks to go out on my own, in 2019, I had a unique moment, let's say, on stream. I had a heated gaming moment where I said, America deserved 9/11. And the thing is, when you're a leftist commentator, when you're in politics and the leftist space, like you always get doxxed, swatted, death threats. It's something that has been, a part of the job, unfortunately. But this time it was different because it was on Fox News, and Dan Crenshaw was crying on Laura Ingraham, and all of a sudden the death threats became way more prominent, and they started yelling at like other random people that worked at the Young Turks as well. Like the key grip was getting doxxed, and I was like, this dude is not, this is my dumbass. Like don't dox the key grip, and I didn't want that kind of unwarranted attention to go towards other people for things that I was saying and doing. So that was my first foray into wanting to go out on my own. And I went full-time in 2020, and I started live streaming every day. And by the end of 2020, I had become a fairly sizable content creator on the platform, one of the biggest content creators on Twitch. And I'll say, since then, I've also invited a lot more negative attention to myself, but at least it's just me this time, so.
We hear a lot about how these new internet spaces are apolitical. A lot of your kind of colleagues in the Twitch space stay away from politics. I'm wondering what made you, I know it's kind of natural to your interest. Why do you think talking about politics works for you on the platform? Like, what are the ways that you have learned to kind of crack that space if others haven't?
Yeah, at first I wanted people to talk about politics because I thought like there were a lot of progressive people out there. I thought it was like good to show that progressive politics is not shameful, that people shouldn't be afraid of speaking their opinions on these matters. And then Asmongold became the largest political content creator on the platform, and some people know who that is, but he is a right-wing commentator now, the biggest right-wing commentator in North America, actually. And now I'm like, maybe don't talk about politics. It's better if they stay apolitical. But for the most part, I think like the apolitical nature of this space is just a way to shelter your more reactionary tendencies in general.
What do you mean?
think people say that they're apolitical, or they say that they're operating off of common sense beliefs, but usually that just simply means you're right wing and not open about it. At least in my experience.
Yeah, but obviously there's been a bigger discussion kind of since Democrats have not been in that space, and there's been some thought about how do they find themselves more naturally there. But I'll talk about that later. Actually, I want to ask more directly. Do you consider the line between like entertainment and activism? Do you think of yourself as a journalist? Like, how do you actually see your role?
Yeah, I don't. I see myself as a political commentator. Like, depending on who I'm talking to, I'll explain it as like Rush Limbaugh without the brain rot, literally and figuratively, because he had brain cancer. And
You're also saying you don't have brain rot. I'm impressed.
Yeah, and also brain cancer, and also I think holes in his brain from prescription drug overuse. He's dead. He can't. What was he gonna do?
We're focusing on that though.
So anyway, but like it's basically like AM radio, but for Zoomers. So that's the way I describe it to people. And I do find myself to be more of an entertainer than an activist. Even though I do engage in activism, I always stress that, I'm simply an entertainer, and I'm trying to urge others to go out and organize as well, because like, I'm just one person, and I would be saying these things even if I had 30 people watching me. But when I have 30,000, 40,000 people watching me, that means there are 30,000 to 40,000 people that can go out and organize and then build a movement that way. So yeah, I see myself as a political commentator and not an activist, even though I do engage in that.
One of the things I think that folks have found, obviously your audience, a testament to this room, skews younger, skews folks who are highly online. I wonder, and is that false? But I guess I'm saying, I think it's also captured an audience that legacy media has missed, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is working in terms of why people are coming to folks like you versus why places like even the New York Times are struggling to reach some of those people?
I mean, I think there is a personality aspect to it for sure. But I think the medium that I'm in is so interactive, and people are looking for that. There's a sense of community building that exists online, on Twitch and in live streaming in general, and that is not exactly replicable by traditional media outlets, and they're never going to be able to do that regardless. Like, it'd be really funny if Jake Tapper had like parasocial stands. That'd be weird.
I think he does.
Doubtful. But I think that's definitely one reason for why I have these audiences. I'm also at a place, like, I speak the language. I'm from a different generation, and I'm also not in the same traditional media orbit. So I wasn't put through the ringer to develop a certain way of speaking and develop an attitude that is like very DC media bubble oriented. And I think that is genuine, and people appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. To the point about the community, I found it really fascinating. Like, it's very obvious, kind of the power that like folks like you hold. I could add up every CNN hit I did of all last year, and it did not derive enough interest or followers or conversation as doing one of those streams. But I also wonder if that creates a kind of feedback loop. Like, when I'm doing a story, I don't have to really think about audience or immediate kind of reaction. Do you feel kind of a pressure because you're in a kind of continuous relationship with the audience? I mean, do you worry about saying some stuff because the chat won't like it?
No. I yell at them all the time. Trust me, there's gonna be dudes on the microphone today that I'm gonna be yelling at, most likely. It's normal. It's a normal part of the process. Like, some people, I think there are certainly people that are audience captured in that regard, but like, for me, I care. I'm way too stubborn and way too brutally honest and maybe a little autistic. So it's just like, I don't care if someone is disagreeing with me. Like, I will take a position that I believe to be true, and obviously I'll arrive at that position by analyzing the facts. And even if it's unpopular, my goal always is to educate people. And that's the thing, like, I wouldn't necessarily say that my perspective that is fairly closer to a more orthodox Marxist perspective is all too common in American media. Most people have never encountered someone who is speaking about these things from the angle that I take. So I already assume that everyone that's listening in, that's tuning in for the first time, is not immediately on board with the way that I see the world. Mm-hmm. So I have no expectation that people are going to be in agreement with me. It's my job to make a convincing argument and to also instill some sense of class consciousness in people that are tuning in.
Mm-hmm. I want to stick on this question of kind of like community and how you kind of moderate that community. You mentioned to me when we were talking the other time just about the efforts you all go through in terms of chat moderation. And I found it really interesting because, those type of spaces has been home for bigotry, slurs, things like that. How much time do you have to spend curating that community and moderating it?
I mean, it's an ongoing process. It's something that I always have to work on, because I have a lot of other places will safeguard their community. They'll have like paywall, like membership only access if you want to communicate. Mm-hmm. Some places will add like additional checks. For me, I want to have discourse. I want to have back and forths with people. I want to be able to educate people if they have questions on certain things. So I have a 10-minute follower mode, which means if you follow me for 10 minutes on my Twitch, you can say anything you want in the chat. And surely some people abuse that. They'll come in and they'll try to antagonize or say heinous things. But in that process, I use that as an educational moment, and I also use every opportunity like that to basically say, like, these are the well-defined boundaries in this community, like what is permissible and what is not. And that's one way that we moderate the community.
To the point about the kind of audience capture, particularly around young people, so much of the discussion has been around young people's disillusion with the political process. I think you speak directly to that. I wanted to see, do you consider yourself trying to overcome that disillusion, or are you just kind of relating to it and kind of wallowing it? Or do you see that kind of education piece as you trying to move people out of their disillusion?
Oh, for sure. I think that disillusionment is a huge problem because everyone has a tendency to fall to the whims of nihilism. And I feel like that's really bad for political progress in general. It's really bad for political mobilization in general. And so one of the things that I try to instill in everyone in my audience is one, self-development for sure, to create some confidence in yourself, achieve short-term victories for yourself so you feel more confident and have a little bit of control over things that are in your life that you have control over. But overall, I think I try to push everyone towards political activism for that reason, organizing, community organizing or labor organizing with unions, because it's one way that I think people can immediately impact their material conditions in a way that's meaningful, and that I think inspires them to keep pushing for more and more, and hopefully build a larger network that can resist against certain things that this administration is doing.
You become a voice for Democrats really asking the why they lost question since the election. I just wanted to start by posing that to you as we start talking about change in parties. Why do you think Kamala Harris lost?
Where do I begin? I've talked about this so much at this point, but
I can imagine.
Democrats are zealots. They are they're so married to the idea of maintaining institutional control, maintaining the infallibility of institutions, and third-way neoliberalism, where they think that a little bit of market regulation, maybe with a lot more deregulation down the line, is how we're going to magically improve people's material conditions at a time when we have incredible wealth disparity and 600,000 people sleeping outside every night in the richest country on the planet, in the richest country throughout history. And I feel like people see these inequalities, and while mainstream media and many other resources that people rely on are constantly telling them, no, this is normal. Everything that you see is actually normal. I think there is a great sense of discontent and anger. And if left unchanneled, you have right-wing reactionary movements that can take that anger, recognize it, and then move it to an unproductive place that benefits their political purposes, as the Trump administration so correctly did, by taking the anger and animosity that people felt and then saying, you're angry not because your boss is fucking you over. Can I curse here? Is that allowed? Okay.
It's too late for that.
Yeah. You're angry not because your boss is screwing you over, but you're angry because it trains people. You're angry because undocumented migrants exist on U.S. soil, and they're able to build on that anger. Whereas the Democrats, I think, were so uninterested in recognizing that, where they thought it's a vibe session, people are not feeling the pain in their wallets. It's going to go away. Yeah. And no matter how many think pieces you write on that, the average person is not that's not going to change the average person experiencing negative real wage growth for almost 2 years under the Biden administration.
Yeah, I think this is where there was a lot of overlap in how in our work and what you were talking about is because that kind of 2021, 2022 moment when Democrats were trying to talk people out of their concerns really sticks out in terms of the reasons why they lost. But I guess I'm just want to clarify, am I hearing that you think more Democrats lost more so than Donald Trump won? Because there's another argument you could say, which is that, he was affirmatively kind of shifting the electorate rather than it was the Democrats' failures at Central.
No, I think there's always a push and pull. And yes, for that reason, I think the Democrats were definitely responsible for their own defeat, for their own demise. And they were responsible not in the campaign cycle. They were responsible early on. I went back and looked at my earlier reporting in the month of February in 2021, where immigration was becoming a problem. We had that image of Customs and Border Patrol on a horseback, like whipping Haitian migrants at the border in Texas. And I remember even back then saying, like, if they don't actually go along with the mandate that they had, with the mandate that Biden had on his first 100 days of immigration, where he was talking about building pathways for amnesty and all these things, if they don't actually fulfill those promises and they don't counter message against the Republicans on this issue, they're going to keep hammering this button over and over again, and the media is absolutely going to go along with it. And lo and behold, that's precisely what happened. 3 years after that, you had Biden on October 6th coming out and saying that they were unveiling this incredibly draconian, incredibly right-wing, white nativist, anti-immigrant agenda package that they said that a Oklahoma senator wrote, and it was basically Trump's 2020 immigration agenda, repackaged and being sold to the American public as a Democratic bill after 8 years of constantly yelling at Republicans for being racist, for wanting to build a stupid border wall. Now they wanted to fund the border wall. And that is at the heart of the Democratic Party's failure, that they don't actually showcase a vision for a better future, and they shy away from policies that will improve people's material conditions. And obviously part of that is because they're captured by the same corporate interests as the Republicans are. But Republicans and the social issues that they can hammer on, the culture war issues that they can hammer on, are way more appealing than the culture war issues that the Democrats try to engage in a defensive posture over, especially because they're not earnest in that defense either. They're no more earnest on defending trans people than like Target is when they roll out LGBTQ friendly baby onesies once a year in the month of, is it July? I don't even know when Pride Month is. June. I'm never defeating the allegation.
Yeah, I'm like.
I say I'm an LGBT foe all the time, and there you go. But it's just, for them, it's hollow. It's not real. It's not a real battle that they want to fight, and they constantly find themselves in this defensive posture, and they allow the Republicans to dominate discourse. They allow Republicans to lead on issues that they can win.
Yeah, but I'm going to push there because isn't there also a public opinion problem here? Like the reason that Biden was moderating on immigration was not just because of Republicans, but because of a legitimate shift among public sentiment that Americans were growing more conservative on the issue. The reason they have, you see the Gavin Newsoms of the world kind of flipping their opinion on trans women in sports is partially because there is numbers that tell you that that's where the country is. Like, sometimes I hear leftists talk as if there's this like unrealized mass of leftists that just hasn't been activated. Is that true, or is that a matter of convincing a public?
It's a matter of convincing the public. It has nothing to do with like how woke everyone is secretly deep down inside and like activating their potential or whatever, and everything to do with the fact that you have to constantly engage in counter messaging, and you have to constantly engage in messaging. And also on top of that, you have to have a unified agenda that touches every single person. And that's why class politics is so important. And I think that's the reason why now you see the Democrats actually leaning on the Bernie Sanders style of commentary, where they're trying to do a fake class first politics as well. But even Bernie himself is actually he's 800 years old, no disrespect, but even he finds himself like, coming across as a little bit right-wing on some of these issues as well. Yeah. But I'm of the belief that I want to talk about two things when it comes to immigration. Number one is there's always two different polls that people never actually react to when talking about immigration. Even at a time when you had the highest approval rating for Trump's mass deportation agenda, right? I mean, this is straight Hitlerian policy. Like mass deportation of 20 million people, that's insane. You're gonna put them in concentration camps? What are we doing? Even at that point, when Americans were consistently asked mass immigration or mass amnesty, they still chose mass amnesty. But no one ever presents that second option as a viable solution to this problem. And that is at the heart of the issue from the way I see it, where if you don't present Americans with the other option, if you don't constantly counter message, if you don't actually do your very best to showcase the humanity of migrants and how much they contribute to these communities, then of course Republicans are going to constantly counter message and talk about some of the most heinous, some of the most violent things that have taken place and attribute that to migrants across the board, even though there's no evidence that shows that undocumented immigrants are responsible for a larger share of crime than natural-born U.S. citizens, and only evidence to show the exact opposite, that they're responsible for less crime per capita than natural-born U.S. citizens are. So Democrats never make that argument. And I think it's because they're afraid. I go back and forth. I sometimes think they're controlled opposition, and then other times I realize whenever I talk to a Democrat or a staffer, I'm like, oh, you're just stupid. Like, you just don't know. You just don't believe in yourself, and you're just posturing as a somewhat progressive figure on certain issues in an effort to win votes, but that's it. Like, it's not genuine.
You know, you mentioned the kind of primacy of class politics, which obviously is a theme in your work. I remember when Bernie was making some of these arguments in the 2016 and 2020 race, and also remember when he ran into big problems in places like South Carolina and others where that argument wasn't really landing. How much does the left need to, win over working class folks of color who haven't really come to them in the same type of way? And what is the balance between recognizing class politics and the importance of identity politics and representation to some folks?
Yeah. You and I actually had this conversation on my stream where we were talking about like the Democrat machine and how strong it is. I also had another conversation similar to this with my friend FD Signifier, shouts out, he's a wonderful YouTuber, about how like the black aunties are the backbone of the Democratic Party, right? Like, and they are—
And the world, basically.
Yeah, yes, exactly, for sure. And what I was interested in understanding is like, I think a lot of people of color understand that it's about survival, and it's about the demon that you know as opposed to the demon that you don't. And in most circumstances, they make this decision knowing full well that like the people that they're voting for are not, I mean, they're maybe marginally less racist than the other side that's like overtly racist, right? And I think that because there's so much strategic voting that takes place in that regard, I think as long as you can make it out of the primary structure, like a figure, no matter how populist they are, no matter how like left-leaning they are, no matter how predisposed with class politics they are, will be able to captivate the attention of like the base of the Democratic Party. Like people that find themselves in a position where they're voting for Joe Biden, whether because they love Joe Biden or because they think that he's a safer bet, are definitely still going to vote for whoever the Democrat is. And I think that's the base of support that we can bring over, rather than try to craft a message specifically for that base of support.
Got it. You mentioned the scenes in first Trump administration, specifically I remember the whip and the immigration moment. I think about that time too, because there was so much public pushback on some of those things. I remember folks going to the airports when the Muslim ban dropped and things.
Yeah.
Do you still see that same level of engagement? I imagine like you're on the pulse of the resistance maybe. Like, why aren't people in the streets?
That's actually a really great question. I think that there's two problems. One is the disillusionment that people feel because I think in the aftermath of the Black Lives Matter protests that took place in 2020, where a lot of people in this room did all of the right things. Like you did it by the book. You went out, you protested in the streets, you yelled at your congresspersons, you tweeted, okay? You did it all. And then when the election came around, you went out and you voted. You held your nose and you voted for Joe Biden, even though he was very visibly deteriorating. And it didn't matter because it was like, it's better than Trump, right? And then nothing came of that. And I feel like that creates a lot of disillusionment amongst young people and just virtually any American that participated in this process that looked at that and went, well, we saw no reforms whatsoever on policing. And as a matter of fact, most of the Democrats were predisposed with like positioning themselves as against these organic movements that were born out of Black Lives Matter. And surely there was people going maybe a little too far in terms of maybe not putting their least radical positions out there. But overall, I think that created a lot of nihilism that we haven't really examined thoroughly. So that's one reason why I don't think a lot of people are even protesting Trump to the same degree as they were last time around. Because last time around, he was also seen as an aberration, like this is not us, when, this definitely was us. Like Trump is a perfect beacon of American stupidity. And
it always bothered me when people say like, this is not, I'm like, what is democracy otherwise? This is us.
That was definitely us. And it still is us. But I think in terms of the immigration, like the conversation definitely shifted to the right due to very little interest from the Democrats in terms of counter messaging. And they got completely captive to white nativist sentiment. And if you recall, you and I had another conversation when you brought up your follow-up on the Run Up podcast, where you talked to these people and you were like, what are you worried about right now? And if you told me that immigration was not at the forefront of anyone's mind, pretty much. And I told you then, and it started to happen already, that eventually it will, because people are going to start developing too much resentment towards this administration's unjustifiable immigrant detention policies. And since we had that conversation, he's underwater even on that issue as well. And the reason why that happened is because they made a major mistake with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They detained and refused to do due process for virtually all of these migrants that they had captured and sent to CECOT into this like slave labor prison structure in El Salvador. And yet an immigration attorney of the Trump administration accidentally revealed that they had made a mistake. And when that happened, the media seized on that. They started covering it. And then it became a major issue of consequence. A major issue that people were demanding some sort of restitution for. And the Trump administration, being hard-headed, refused. And it led to Chris Van Hollen actually going down to El Salvador to get proof of life for this person. And in that process, I think a lot more Americans started realizing what was truly happening. Because they're busy. Everyone is busy. Mm-hmm. They're focusing on their own lives. They've completely checked out of politics. But like, when an issue becomes noteworthy enough that like a lot of outlets are covering it, Americans still do have a collective conscience where they go, okay, that's really messed up, and we shouldn't let that happen. And that momentum is only going to build from this point on, because it's not like the Trump administration is going to back away from doing these unjustifiable detention policies. And it's only going to escalate further. And then you'll start seeing more protests in the streets. Mm-hmm.
One more question on Democrats before we move on. There's another argument I've heard some folks say that like it wasn't a matter of message, it was just that they weren't in the right places, right? Like they actually bring those to people, that Democrats had kind of lost culture more than it is a need for a policy shift. I know your team, they need to change their policies, but if we're just focusing on kind of where they deliver their message, how do they get back into culture?
They should just go on Call Her Daddy. That was good. I mean, no disrespect to Call Her Daddy, but it's just, I don't think you can.
I mean, to that point, I remember that interview as like a moment when Democrats were bringing their same message just to a new place, right?
Yeah.
That seems like part of the problem.
Yeah, but if the message is shit, it's not going to resonate with people. Like Kamala Harris's brilliant campaign message was like $50,000 in tax breaks for small businesses. Like she kept saying like, I am a small business. I love small businesses. It was like, that doesn't resonate with people that are having a hard time struggling to pay their bills. You know what I mean?
You really think people vote on policy first?
I think people vote on an earnest communicator that can promise them a better life. Mm-hmm. And that is not what the Democrats do in general. They never come across as earnest. They come across as entitled, smug, elitist. And also, two, the policies are far too technocratic in their approach. Like, look at Elizabeth Warren versus Bernie Sanders as an example. Elizabeth Warren and she's done fantastic work with like Lena Khan, for example. And on the back end, on the policy side, like CFPB is brilliant. It's fantastic. But Elizabeth Warren as a campaigner, unfortunately, is a freaking nerd. It's just not, that's going to resonate well with like people on Twitter. That's going to resonate well with like college educated people, but you're not making an impact with like regular Americans. You're not, if your messaging discipline revolves around this technocratic approach, then it's not going to work. Sometimes you have to engage in this kind of populist sentiment in the way that Bernie did, which is why I think he saw a lot more success.
I wanted you to talk, you mentioned you being detained at O'Hare yesterday. I wanted you to talk about that story and tell me about that experience, some of the questions they asked you.
Okay, great reception from Chicago. I will say, last time I was here, I got kicked out of DNC. This time,
Listen,
time I got apprehended.
We're the Pope's country. We're blessed. You can't bring us down right now.
They're gonna arrest the Pope when he steps foot. They're gonna be like, "What'd you say about JD Vance?"
But tell us what happened.
So I knew that this was probably gonna happen. I'd seen a lot of TikToks of people talking about how like they got detained as American citizens at the border, and I was like joking about it, but deep down inside I was like, this is probably gonna happen to me eventually. And this was my first entry into the country with global entry as well. So I have global entry, for those of you who don't know. It's you go to the Department of Homeland Security and they let you it's like a fast pass, which is crazy. We've Disneyland commodified everything. But yeah, I'm supposed to be like a good traveler, which is why I'm supposed to cut the line, right? And I did that. I went through global entry, took my photo, everyone's getting waved away, and then as soon as I got to the Customs and Border Patrol, the lady was like, "Step aside, sir." I was like, "Oh, here we fucking go." I did. They took me to the back room into a detention center. I asked around when I was inside, like if people had American passports. Most of the people there did not. They were traveling from outside of the country. They weren't American citizens. I saw one American passport in the detention center for one of the people, and they would basically periodically come out. Agents would come out and be like, "All right, your name, and then you can leave." But I was sent to the back room. An agent came out and took me into the interrogation room, and it was a very creepy fluorescent light bulb environment where like everything was steel, like all the seating arrangements were steel and bolted into the ground. And they started asking me about crazy shit, like, do you like Donald Trump?
They asked you directly, do you like Donald Trump?
Yeah, they were like, what do you think about Donald Trump? And I was like, why are you asking me this? What does this have to do with anything? And they just kept asking and prodding and asking me about Hamas, and do I think Hamas is a resistance group, or if it's actually a terrorist group? Are they bad guys? What do you think about Israel? What do you think about the war? What do you think about the Houthis?
Now, are you engaging in like a discussion here, or what?
Well, I just kept repeating. Whenever he asked me about Hamas, I was like, they are designated by the State Department as a terrorist group.
But the substance doesn't really matter. I'm just asking about what is the pretense of why that is restricting you from getting in?
Yeah, I mean, it's illegal for him to even ask me those questions. Like, they can't deny me entry into my own country even if I was like, I love Hamas, they can't do that. Like, what do you mean?
How long did it last?
America.
How long did it last?
The whole process took over about 2 hours. And they went back and forth. Like, there was a point where he asked me all these questions, like, including drama, which was crazy. Like, he was like, well, it says here you got banned off Twitch. It's like, bro, you're an agent of the federal government. What do you mean I got banned off Twitch? Like, what are you, a Redditor? Like, it was insane. And he's like, yeah, care to explain that? And I was like, yeah, I got banned off Twitch for, describing the concept of blowback. And that's the most positive way that I could tell him that I said America deserved 9/11 without him apprehending me. And then he's like, well, it says here that you wanted to kill a senator? And I was like, no, that's not what I meant. I was talking about like the Republicans being hypocritical.
So how did it end?
Basically, he left, he came back, and then he asked me like the hard-hitting questions. Like, if you say yes to those, you're going to jail. Where he was like, have you ever been in contact with someone in Hamas or Hezbollah or Houthis? I was like, no. I was like laughing at this point. I was like, no, I have not been. Do you have their number? And after that, basically at a certain point, I was like, am I being detained? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And he was like, no, not at all. I was like, so I can leave if I want to? He was like, oh, well, and then he didn't even ask me for my phone after that, which was, because that was my red line. Mm-hmm. I wanted to test the boundaries. I didn't like immediately lawyer up or anything, because I wanted to see like what they were going to ask me, because I do have a decent amount of privilege, as opposed to like a random college activist, you know what I mean, who can be bullied in that situation. So I wanted to test like what they would ask and what they would prod about. And it was shocking. Like it was shocking that these were questions that they were asking me as though like they're gonna deny me entry into the country.
That is definitely worth entry. We have 10 minutes before audience questions, so y'all keep that in mind. And I think we're gonna start putting some of the mics out. You all can start lining up as you have them. You mentioned some of your previous controversies. I wanna ask, oh wow, we're getting mass movement. Well, let's chill out. Let's walk, y'all.
I told you I'm gonna yell.
Let's calm down, friends. Okay, I want to ask directly about some of the controversies you referenced.
Hit me.
And you know, I would love an earnest response here. I mean, you mentioned some of the back and forth. There was a statement from the Chicago Jewish Alliance I'm going to read to you and would love for you to respond to. Piker has a history of making inflammatory statements, including America deserved 9/11, a remark that trivializes national tragedy, referring to Israelis. Don't laugh.
Sorry.
I'm serious. Referring to Israel as inbred and a dehumanizing stereotype that echoes historical anti-Semitic stereotypes, dismissing reports of sexual violence on the October 7th Hamas attacks, stating it doesn't matter if rape happened on October 7th, it doesn't change the dynamic for me. Such statements have prompted concern for public officials, and they mentioned some other folks. By inviting Piker to speak, the University of Chicago risk endorsing a narrative that endorses views as harmful and divisive. I'm posing this to you partially because I want the direct response, but also I think it's important for folks to hear a real answer to this stuff. We're not going to run from these things. We're going to talk about them directly.
Yeah.
I want you to, what do you, like, just respond.
Okay. Yeah, the fact that like people still use that quote when I say like it doesn't matter what happened on October 7th, that doesn't change the dynamic for me is like so revealing, because Israel is committing a genocide, and my position on this is clear that like whatever happened on October 7th, the atrocities that took place on October 7th does not justify genocide. And it's really, well, thank you. Well, I mean, this isn't a brave position, I don't think. Like, and that's what's so alarming, that like people will say that all the time. Like people will put that in like the Free Press or Daily Mail or whenever there's like a hit piece written from these smear rags in general. And I'm always confused by that, because I'm like, what are you saying? So you're saying that it does justify genocide? Like it's always come across as very confusing to me. And overall, yeah, I am someone who is firmly committed to combating anti-Semitism for my past decade of work. I've been doxxed and swatted by neo-Nazis in perpetuity for this reason. But I also happen to be a committed anti-Zionist, that I believe in the emancipatory cause for Palestinians. And I've never shied away from that position, no matter what.
But something like America deserved 9/11 is obviously at least inflammatory.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, do you ever think about the impact of those words? And do you have to, you know, I know it's an informal forum, you're kind of rolling with it live. Like, how do you wrestle with, you know, something that could be offhand, but actually be more meaningful? You know, actually be more hurtful, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that America deserved 9/11 in general was probably one of my most vindicated takes. Maybe I'm delusional about it, but in terms of describing the concept of blowback and explaining like how we got to 9/11, a lot of people were unaware of the machinations behind the scenes from Operation Cyclone, or even before that, even prior to that, in terms of like arming and radicalizing the Mujahideen and using them in the Afghan Civil War against the USSR, and what that turned into. That is a common thread in American foreign policy, is that people that we give arms to and offer a lot of training and support to inevitably turn on us for understandable reasons. So I don't shy, like even if I say something that is hyperbolic in that moment, because I get passionate sometimes and I have what people call a heated gaming moment, it's ultimately my message is clear. And does that get in the way of me reaching a broader audience? Certainly. I understand that, but you know, it happens. It happens sometimes.
So I hear you more have made peace with it than think it's a thing that you're gonna because I'm saying like a heated gaming moment for a lot of folks is just a heated gaming moment. For you, it's a big audience. So I'm saying, have you changed the way you think about those things? For sure, especially because like I don't really appreciate all the doxing that comes afterwards and the swatting that comes afterwards, but it's definitely something that gets away in the message that I'm trying to present. And so for that reason, I do try to moderate every now and then, or try to regulate my temperature every now and then when I find myself saying something that might easily be misconstrued or is like explosive, right? But overall, mistakes still happen. I'm a human being. I own up to it, you know? And that was one of those moments. Cool. Last question I have, and then we'll go to the audience questions. So much of your life is lived publicly. I find it kind of shocking, like just how much is just, you know, how much just living out there you do, and how folks, you know, really come to understand you, have a relationship with you because of that. I wanted to ask, what's something we don't know? What's a misunderstanding about you? What's something you've kept to yourself, and how have you regulated that? Ooh, that's interesting. That's not a question that I thought I'd be answering. I mean, everything is online except for, I guess, like personal relationships that I have. I try to keep private to the best of my ability because I don't want to invite, you know, unwelcome attention to other people because, you know, I can deal with it, but not everyone is like equipped or should be equipped to deal with that sort of stuff. In terms of like something about me that people don't know, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. I would say that I've never had a position where I think people should not have nice things. That's like the number one thing that people always be like, oh, rich socialist, what a hypocrite. But it's like, no, I want everyone to be able to have like enough disposable income so they can buy stupid shit. So that's, I guess, like one of the most common misconceptions. But I think people in this audience probably already knew my position on this because, you know, you guys probably tune in every now and then. You're pro nice stuff. Yeah, I think, and stupid shit too. Like not just nice stuff, like things that make you feel good. Okay, I'm gonna ask you this question again in a little bit. I want you to think of a better answer. Okay. We're gonna go to audience questions. So remember, questions have a question mark at the end. They're not statements. And we're gonna try to keep them as brief as possible, but please, let's go.
Hello, my name is Alex Fuentes. I'm a second year at the college. I am Salvadoran American, so the immigration issue is very close to me. I'm gonna shoot you a softball. So the issue I face with like working within the city is that a lot of people have felt not very invested in, or their communities have not been very invested in. So when we look at amnesty or looking at these programs for immigration, they face a lot of pushback. So what do you say to that kind of person? How do you fight the immigration issue as a Democrat when talking to those kind of people?
Yeah, that's not a softball. That's a tough one. Because unfortunately, you're not wrong. I think a lot of people, like I said, are so busy with whatever is going on in their lives that they sometimes will be very selfish. And they refuse to contend with the reality that migrants, undocumented and documented alike, are all around us, and there are very important parts of our community. And I feel like the best you can do in that regard is to showcase the humanity of the people that you're talking about, and try to present that as to the best of your ability over and over again, and keep hammering on that point. And this isn't the best time to be able to do that either, because like understandably, a lot of undocumented migrants especially are trying to hide to the best of their ability to not invite unwelcome attention and potentially some kind of federal regulation, you know, ICE, Gestapo agents coming and knocking down their door. So it's additionally difficult to do so right now, but I think community organizing and community programs would probably go a long way in that regard, you know, getting together and showcasing the different cultures that make up Chicago what it is. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cole, and I'm a fourth-year undergrad. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but your radical stances and like very public-facing identity has led to a lot of like continuous pushback and outrage, which seems like you're at least reasonably competent at dealing with. But I was curious about like, how do you deal with the like emotional turmoil of when this affects people close to you, like friends or family? How do you like deal with this emotionally, and also what steps do you take to prevent this from happening?
Great question.
Yeah. As far as, I mean, I can't speak to like people close to me, like my former podcast co-host or whatever, if that's what you're asking about, because like they're content creators, so it's different. Like it's a totally different beast. But in terms of disagreements that I have with people in my life, I try to manage that to the best of my ability by talking about other things, especially if it's a relationship worth preserving, especially because I know in the long term, I can convince them on some of these positions as long as I maintain this relationship without severing that tie. Because if you sever that tie, then you're basically losing that battle. That person will probably succumb further and further into reactionary ideology. So, it's good to find mutual interests that don't revolve around politics and try to hammer that on to the best of your ability. And like I always say, be normal, because in my normal day-to-day existence, I don't talk about, the Ansar Allah militancy in the Red Sea against the Israeli genocide, right? Like that's not a normal conversation that's taken place all the time. Having said that, there are certainly disagreements that I have in groups of friends, for example, with respect to trans issues. Like someone will say an off-color remark, and I'll be like, "Don't do that." Come on, you're being whack. Like there are subtle ways of moderating people in your life to make sure that they understand that that's not something that you find to be appropriate or funny. And also be cool. I think that goes a very long way, I promise. Being normal and being cool goes a very long way to make your politics more palatable to everyone around you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
No problem.
I love like coolness as like a thing that's just be cool,
Well, I mean, I know it's like maybe it doesn't come natural, but it is important.
Yeah. That's next question.
Hi, I'm Hayes. I'm a fourth year in the college. So my question, Hasan, is that you for a long time identified as a Marxist, or you've identified with Marxism in some capacity. Earlier, you raised Orthodox Marxism. This was in large part what distinguished you in the Young Turks, but you're also something of a sort of critical left figure within the Democratic Party, something of an opposition figure. And so I want to ask about that, because there's a way in which the question of like capitalist parties for the left is like the most traumatic sort of legacy or inheritance of the 20th century. I remember back in 2018, in spheres kind of adjacent to yours on the internet, there's an old meme that went like, Bernie bros killed Rosa Luxemburg. I don't know if anyone else, but the spirit is that like it was social democrats in Germany which murdered, communists in the 1920s, 1910s. Yeah. And it's like, it sounds insane, but it's not insane because it's not true. It's insane because Marxism is like off the table in some sense. And so to kind of crystallize, but also the people who were saying that by and large supported Bernie, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah. So to crystallize this dilemma, there's some sense in which like the political thrust of Orthodox Marxism is that capitalist politics and capitalist parties are utterly inadequate to achieve socially necessary, possible, and desirable goals, but nonetheless, independent socialist politics are impossible and off the table. So my question is, like, how do you understand the relationship between Marxism and Democratic Party politics, Marxism and capitalist politics more broadly?
Yeah, great question. Well, Nancy Pelosi is obviously a communist, as everybody knows. I think that in order to build an underlying base of political education necessary for Americans to develop class consciousness, you still need to engage in some semblance of entryism, where you have to work with the tools that are readily available at your disposal. This doesn't mean that you cast aside your political message or your ideology or your movement, but it's simply to use the pre-existing readily available platforms that are given to you. That's why I'm on Twitch, I'm on Amazon, right? Like it's a wholly corrupt monopoly that abuses people around the planet, and even abuses small business owners in their predatory pricing schemes that they've developed. So they're even destroying petty bourgeois people. But having said that, it's still a viable platform to communicate a message. and that is always my goal, is to develop class consciousness and to develop a mechanism of pushback that is still backed by the existing labor force, with the hopes that eventually this could bring about a movement that could resemble a vanguard party, or at least turn the Democratic Party by force into a labor party, into a workers' party.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for being here and taking our questions. So as I'm sure you know, you have a fairly large audience, probably more reach within younger people in the Democratic Party than politicians like Kamala Harris do. And with that comes a lot of responsibility, especially with statements that might be considered by some to be anti-Semitic or sexist, or reactions like laughing in a circumstance where it's not appropriate that might signal to college students that it's appropriate to laugh. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious what kind of steps you're taking to ensure that as a messenger who's trusted by so many young people, you're not engaging in any sort of discrimination or anti-Semitism, and really engaging in a productive discussion about politics.
Great question. I try to stress the importance fairly regularly of, especially at a time when anti-Semitism has exploded, from Kanye West's latest song all the way down to some of the most prominent conservative pundits openly agitating towards anti-Semitism, using cynically what is going on in Gaza to develop a heinous message that then attributes all of those crimes to Jewish people. I find myself virtually every day speaking out against that and decoupling Zionism and Judaism on a regular basis, in an effort to educate people that might find themselves on the whims of unexamined anti-Semitic tendencies. In terms of like laughing at certain things or coming across as anti-Semitic, there are a lot of groups and a lot of people that, especially in the online space, that predispose themselves with drama. So they're always going to try to find the most nefarious frame to present me in the worst light possible. But I always say the antidote to all of that is to simply pay attention for an extended period of time to what I'm saying, and you will very quickly realize that you might have gotten duped into believing a certain thing that I believe that I definitely do not. So in terms of nefarious clipping or things that get clipped out of context, there's not really much I can do about that. Unfortunately, it's just the name of the game. And I just try to put my best foot forward to the best of my ability, and hope that people can still maintain charitability and understand where I'm coming from. But yeah, as far as education goes, I think it's a very important part of my commentary to constantly talk about the growing dangers, the canary in the coal mine of anti-Semitism, which is usually a first step towards growing fascist ideology.
Thank you. Great question.
Hi, Hasan. My name is Danny. I'm a third year at the college. And I don't know if you're aware, but the university recently received a very hefty free speech fund. And when I told my roommate that you were coming here, she said that you were a product of that free speech fund. And this university has made itself a reputation for handling student movements on the notes of Palestinian struggle in a very particular way. And I was wondering if you ever felt tokenized by the university as a way for them to be like, oh, look, we care, as a gotcha moment, for you.
Well, just as a fact point, he's not here from the fund or from other, he's here from the IOP, and because...
Are you tokenizing me instead?
Yeah, and because I asked him to come.
No, he asked me.
I think that this is actually the opposite of that. We're here to engage in the earnest point of that discussion, and so I would just want to say, factually, that's not how he came. But you want to answer that yourself?
No, I mean, I don't know anything about the free speech fund. What, are you, where's my money?
Where's my... If you're not, we're both asking the same question then.
Yeah, no, I love Astead. He's great, and he wanted me to come and speak to you guys, so I was like, yeah, I'll do it. It wasn't like a...
And very earnestly, I think it's just an effort for, places like the Institute of Politics to be where students are and to engage in those type of discussions. So I think it's the opposite of tokenization. I think it's earnest.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hello. Thanks for speaking with us today. My name is Robbie. I'm a second year at the college. So a few weeks ago, I witnessed a student rip down a poster on campus that said, "Come learn about Judaism," simply that. When I told the individual to stop me, he told me, a Jewish student, that I was sympathizing with Nazis. So my question to you, do you think anti-Semitism on college campuses is a problem, and how should we work to combat it?
Oh, anti-Semitism is absolutely a problem on college campuses. It's a problem everywhere. It's like any other bigotry. If left unexamined, and especially at a time when material conditions worsen, it's going to get significantly worse. In terms of the packaging of Israel's actions with Judaism, I think that this is a common issue that at least Jewish members of my community are always struggling with, where they talk about the unfortunate fears that they feel as far as like people associating them with the actions of Israel. And this is a great example of that, where this person absolutely was doing that, where this person thinks like, oh, you're a Nazi, you love Israel because you're defending a sign that says, come learn about Judaism. Like, Judaism has nothing to do with Israel. Judaism has nothing to do with Zionism. And I feel like the more we educate people.
All right, man, I gotta speak up, man. I came out from New York. I went to Rutgers, and I made a song about the hostages. Jewish. What do we say at the end of Passover? We say next year in Jerusalem.
Okay.
We're trying to actually engage in some question and answer. Can we? You're skipping all the folks who stayed in line and are patiently trying to ask their question. No. We don't need to boo y'all. It's okay.
No, I am.
It's okay.
I came and I respectfully. No.
Is bro about to rap?
Judaism has everything to do with Israel. Bro, it does. I mean, at least I know a lot of you cap, but Hasan, please, bro, you're from Rutgers. You live right next to
Let me ask you something.
Wait.
Not that person.
Okay.
Not that person. The student who raised
the question. Yeah.
Raised the question about the Judaism sign. Like, do you feel comfortable being associated with that dude?
My God.
Israel is a very important part of Judaism. I do not agree with what the Israeli government is doing, but Israel is very important to Judaism. It is a home of democracy in the Middle East, and is a safe place for Jews after the Holocaust. And Jewish people need Israel to exist. That is what I believe.
I appreciate that. Now we're going to focus on questions, y'all. So next question.
It was my bad. I asked the question.
No, I get it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for asking the question too.
Well, that's a weird one to follow up. Hi, my name's Colton. I'm a first year at the college. My favorite part of your ideology has always been your incessant focus on charitability, and like it's what you talk about all the time. But for the average American voter that we talked about in this talk, who only votes on emotion, who doesn't have the time to engage in that, they are more susceptible to the conflation that Sam Cedar just talked about in the conversation you had with your former co-host. So when you lead your examples by case studies and evidence and all of these things that those voters whose vote counts just as much as everyone in this room aren't receptive to, how do you adjust your framework to supply evidence that is less academic but still combats that inflation and still showcases that charitability?
Good question.
I think it doesn't have to be rigorous and academic. Like when we're making an argument, it doesn't always have to. You can rely on emotional appeals. Like, you don't have to be a robot. Like, there's no debate moderator that's going to tell you like that's an ad hominem. You're not allowed to do that. Like, you can do whatever you want. It's like a cheat code, really. Like, you can use all the logical fallacies at your disposal if you want to explain something to people. It's very effective. That's what most people online that love debating do. They try to rationalize those sorts of things, but that's pretty much what they're engaging in. And as far as like maintaining endless charitability, my starting position on this is that I understand that this is a settler colonial nation that was designed by slavers and was built on the fundamentals of erasing the indigenous population. And a lot of social conditioning plays a role in our everyday existence to normalize that sort of thing. And therefore, of course, people are going to have a starting position that is reactionary on a lot of these issues. So as long as you remind yourself of that and take on that emotional labor, you'll be able to overcome this. You'll be able to make a convincing argument. As if, like I said, if you're normal and cool and try to talk to people and meet them where they're at and recognize some of the common points of struggle and pain that they experience, you can always package that back up to whatever kind of social malady that they are representing and move them away from that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hi, I'm also from the college, fourth year. I remember you guys both mentioned, or there was a topic that was raised about disenfranchisement, feeling like hopeless. We bought into whatever campaign, and then another campaign on the left, on the right, both sides or whatever. And then there was also the question, or sorry, the topic of, do people actually vote on policy? I wanted to ask to, what extent do you think the populist movements, your Peter Thiel, your David Brooks, you, for example, to what extent do...
I feel like that was an interesting... That is a crazy spectrum.
It is kind of crazy. To what extent do you think it's kind of like a response to a global phenomenon, but then maybe like projecting on something else between those different groups? To what extent do you think, we can avoid some big disaster before, people actually start voting on policy, start thinking about what we can do together, not just blaming somebody else?
Well, I don't think that there is any way to vote on policy right now. That's at the heart of the problem with the Democratic Party, especially, is that they're not crafting a message that revolves around discernible policies that you can point to. Like, you can do that for Bernie. You could say he's for Medicare for all, he's for free college. He said that for 80 years, right? But you can't really pin down the Democrats on issues like that. So then, because they do not have a coherent, policy-focused message like that, no like tangible legislative action that you can associate them with, they are associated with whatever the Republicans present them as. Kamala Harris doesn't care about you because she's too busy trying to do transgender bottom surgeries for Guatemalans, and it's like, all it takes is like one clip from an ACLU seminar that Kamala Harris answered that question on for Americans to go, oh yeah, that is weird. Why does she care only about that? I don't think she cares about anything. If Kamala Harris had policies that you could associate with her that truly address some of the issues that people are experiencing in this country, everyone could just go, oh, shut up, it's nothing. Like, okay, that's one answer that she gave. Why do you care about this? She cares about Medicare for all. Do you not want health care? So that's what I want the Democrats to get to, so that they can actually more successfully be a counterbalance towards growing fascism. But you're right, if they don't do that, then we're cooked, and we're just gonna keep spiraling towards barbarism.
Yeah, I mean, recognizing that some people don't just vote on policy and some vote on vibes, there's one answer to change that. The other answer is to have better vibes, like
that too.
Yeah, like Barack Obama spoke to people who were voting for a whole bunch of reasons.
Barack Obama world, though?
No. But I'm saying a successful electoral politician does all of the above, is what I'm saying. So that's the only example I'm doing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Hasan. Thank you for doing this. My name's Lance. I'm a second year in the college, and growing up in a rural area during this time, I've seen the polarization of young men particularly, and I was wondering how the Democrats could begin to activate some of these young men or bring them to their side, and also, when is the Subnautica playthrough going to get finished?
I don't even know what that second part
Subnautica is a game I played, but I got too scared to finish it.
Oh, okay.
It was very scary, in my defense. It's a very scary game. It's underwater horror. It's anyway.
Young men.
Yeah, about young men. I think that there are a lot of people that are genuinely incredibly insecure in the manosphere space that present themselves as this like hyper masculine idea of like what a 14-year-old would think is like a cool person, and the best antidote to that is to focus on hobbies that are productive and you know, improve yourself, improve your body, engage in the act of constantly choosing to better yourself and be a positive figure for people around you. And that's what I try to do, at least. And I think if more people were to do that, young men in particular, would be more responsive to that.
Gotcha. And how can the Democrats activate those voters?
We only have a couple more minutes. Can we just stick with one question? Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
This is the last question.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My name is Cassidy. I'm a second year here at the college. You know, there's the old joke about, oh, to be a real leftist, you have to read XYZ pieces of literature, you have to know all these thinkers, whatever. But I've also seen a lot of attribution of the growth of the younger right-wing base with the, you know, decade-old now alt-right pipeline, and, you know, its modern incarnations, as were briefly spoken on. I was wondering how you think it would be possible to cultivate long-lasting leftist spaces online when there's such high perception of barriers to entry.
I mean, I don't think I engage in dense literature, and I don't think anyone should really do that, because the entire...
Incredible sentence at the University of Chicago.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, when you're communicating, when you are engaging in the act of propaganda, not as like the way that people understand propaganda, but as just like telling a message. I think it's on you to simplify said message rather than try to point people in the direction of dense literature that's like very hard to tackle. And I try to do that with everything that I engage with, whether it's like me doing crime reacts or you know, reacting to a YouTube video. This is what I believe, so this is my worldview. So I try to bake that understanding of the world into everything that I do, and slowly but surely hope that people develop this different perspective. And I think everyone can do that, but it does require a little bit of reading ahead of time in order to get there. Because to be able to describe difficult concepts, difficult to broach concepts in simplified terms, you have to develop a very good understanding of said concepts. So it's good to read. Sorry for saying, but when you're engaging normies, you probably shouldn't you know, point to dense academic literature, but instead try to summarize the positions that you know from these places.
Y'all, thank you so much for being here. We had a great time.